Hello, everyone, and welcome to Better Together. My name is Julian Lute, and on behalf of Great Place to Work, thank you for joining today's CEO conversation. We've learned a lot about creating great workplaces over the past 30 plus years. And one of the most important is that any company in any industry can create a great workplace experience for all of their people. And PulteGroup is an inspiration for us all. What began as a single home built by the hands and entrepreneurial spirit of its founder in 1950 is now America's third largest home builder with operations in more than 40 major cities. This year, they appeared on the People's Company That Care list, Fortune Best Workplaces for Millennials, Fortune Best Workplaces for Women, the 100 Best Companies to Work For, as well as the Great Place to Work Best Workplaces in Texas. Before we jump into this conversation, let's cover a few housekeeping details. As always, we look forward to your comments and questions, so please submit them in the questions panel. Today's conversation is being recorded and will be available on our website within an hour of this discussion, so you can share directly with your colleagues and your community. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ryan Marshall, President and CEO of PulteGroup, Inc. Through its diverse brand portfolio, the company is one of the industry's most versatile home builders. Having managed many of the company's largest operations during his tenure, Ryan has a deep understanding of the home building business. He's most recently served as PulteGroup's president with responsibility for the company's home building operations, marketing, and strategy departments. Prior to this, Marshall was executive vice president of home building operations. Ryan is joined in conversation by our CEO, Michael Bush. Ryan, thank you for joining us. And Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Julian, thank you very much. And Ryan, very much looking forward to this time that we're going to spend together. And thank you for joining us from beautiful Atlanta, Georgia.
Michael, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Ryan. Me too. And I just want to get started with a statement that you use at the PulteGroup. I'm very inspired by the following statement, so I want to share it with all the people who have joined us today. Our commitment to all employees, work that moves you, trust that empowers you, a company that brings you pride and opportunities to grow, and our goals, inspired employees, exceptional customer experience, superior operational execution, and foresight for the future. To me, that's an excellent commitment of what we call a great place to work for all, providing work that moves the people and trust that empowers the people, and this goal of exceptional customer experience. How did both your commitment to your people and those core goals take care of the business by providing a strong foundation, especially in 2020 and 2021?
You know, Michael, I think it'd be helpful for me to provide a little bit of context about what happened to our business as we went into the beginning of the pandemic. Nearly overnight in March of 2020, our business dropped by almost 75%. And as leaders of the company, we were looking around and we were seeing the economic devastation that was going on inside of the country and the world for that matter. We were frankly terrified. A lot of us have been in the housing business for a long time. And typically when you see significant economic downturns, the housing industry does not do well. And it certainly felt like we were in for a repeat of some of the things that we've experienced in the past. And so we quickly started to take some action with how we were running the company, how we were taking care of our employees, how we were communicating with our employees in an effort to keep the company on stable footing. So with that as a backdrop, let me move to two of the primary goals that we have that you mentioned early on. And the first is to have inspired employees, and the second is great customer experience. And the reality is that these two things, in our view, are inextricably linked. One creates the other. And so since the beginning of this company, we've always put our employees first. We felt that if we provide that great work experience, we create a career path and work that's really motivating and inspiring, employees are able to bring their best selves to work each and every day, which in turn creates an amazing experience for our customers. we have used one of our core beliefs of doing the right thing to help guide us in how we treat our employees, how we treat our customers, how we treat each other, how we treat our trade partners. And I think it's really served us well. The final thing that I'd probably highlight is that we really focused on active two-way communication. So as we went into the beginning of the pandemic, and even still today, things were changing rapidly. Decisions that we would make yesterday would have to be changed today. And so those underlying kind of core beliefs and our goals, along with, I think, really outstanding communication, helped us, continue to put our employees and our culture first.
Well, Ryan, we love you talking about the fact that by putting your employees first, you put your customers first. That's the way to do it. And we have a lot of data to support that. And I just had a pit in my stomach when you talked about what 2020 and losing 75% of your business. I remember that because I experienced the same thing. Now I feel a little better today, but you just reminded me of that feeling. And I just want to ask, you don't have to share any specifics if you don't want to, but how did PulteGroup do financially in 2020?
Well, Michael, 2020 was great for the entire housing industry. And really what we saw happen was Americans really had a couple of things happen. Number one, we saw a lot of people leave apartment style living or more densely populated, living arrangements. And they were looking for things more in suburban areas, a little bit more space, single family type living. And so that really benefited the entire industry. We also saw individuals that already lived in single family living arrangements that were now working from home, teaching their kids school from home. They were exercising from home. Really everything in our lives were taking place in our homes. And so we saw Americans that needed something different from their living arrangement, meaning they sold their home and they moved to something, to a new home. And then the third thing that we really saw going on, because of the remote working environment that a lot of American workers were in, folks were able to move to cities and locations that they otherwise may have never been able to, declare that their residence, if you will. And so all of those things for our company yielded one of the best years that we've had in over a decade in 2020. As we move to kind of current day in 2021, our business continues to perform really well. One of the challenges that we are having, and I think most industries are, the disruption that we're seeing in the global supply chain right now certainly is problematic.
Yeah. I just love that moment of fear and putting your people first, having inspiring employees, providing exceptional customer service, superior operational execution, and thinking about the future. And the way to take care of the future is your employees, and then the money followed. For us, it's like, this work and this way of believing is better for business, better for people, and better for the world. And so as you think about what you're still going through, because, we see a light at the end of the tunnel and we know it's not a train now. So, really good for us. But you run one of those companies where not everybody could work remotely. Over half of the organization are frontline workers. How did you ensure, and how are you still ensuring that those that are on the front line, working every day, and yes, some in offices and some maybe perhaps returning, are still working in an organization where they feel physically safe and psychologically safe? And how have you made sure that your leaders prioritized taking care of the people during this time? And how are you continuing to do that in 2021?
Yeah, Michael, it's obvious, but none of us have ever lived through a pandemic. And so I think it's easy to say none of us were experts, and we certainly didn't have all the answers. So as leaders inside of Pulte, we really tried to show some vulnerability as leaders and ask a lot of questions in an effort to find out what we needed to do to keep our business stable. But to your point, what we needed to do to keep our frontline employees safe and secure as well. We have a lot of employees that work in big corporate centers, and we were able to move those employees remote in pretty quick fashion. That required a lot of technological resources and changes that we previously had never used. I give a huge shout out to our IT department that I think reacted quickly and really got all of our remote workers up and working the way that we wanted to. For a lot of our frontline employees that were not able to work remotely, it's very difficult, as I'm sure you can appreciate, to build a house remotely. It's difficult to sell a house remotely. And so we really worked early on to communicate with our frontline workers to find out what their concerns were, what their fears were, what they needed, and then did everything in our power to provide those resources and those tools that they needed to continue to do their job, to continue to be successful, but most importantly, to keep them safe. We've continued to do that today. A recent example that I would give you, Michael, is we've been actively communicating with a lot of our workforce that's been working remote and asking them how they feel about coming back to the office. We were planning to be back in the office just after Labor Day in early September. The feedback that we heard is that our employees weren't quite ready. Obviously, the recent spike in the Delta variant caused a lot of concern for a lot of our employees. And so, largely because of the feedback that we got from our employees, we pushed our reopening date to, early 2022. Got
it. So Ryan, during a time when human connection was really, really difficult to come by, one of the leaders in particular, and we see this consistently in the survey results around this caring and this concern. But one of your VP of operations started, as people were transitioning to remote work, a practice of having one-on-one conversations with remote workers, particularly those who were living alone or those who had family members perhaps in tough and challenging situations or friends nearby that they couldn't see. I see this incredible example of care, in a circumstance that people hadn't really been in before. Number one, what do you do to create a sense of empowerment where your leaders know they have this idea, it's just something that they naturally do to live out the values? And are there other things that your people have done, kind of examples like this, to encourage other leaders to do the same thing and to make the people know that they're sincerely cared for?
Michael, I think no matter the relationships that we have in life, whether they're personal or professional relationships, being present is the number one thing that we can do to convey the sense of I care. And so we really encouraged all of our leaders in the company to be present. Sometimes that was physically, sometimes that was virtually. We then really did a lot of listening and then active communicating. And it was this virtuous cycle of being present, listening, and communicating that I think helped to convey that sense of we care as your employer. We worked really hard to identify where there were vulnerabilities inside of our organization, and we focused on caring for the whole person. And for us, that meant social connection, that meant physical well-being, and that meant mental well-being as well. And so there were several things that we've done inside of the organization to make sure that we were addressing all three of those areas. One example that I would give you, early on in the pandemic, our leaders personally delivered PPE to some of our frontline workers. We knew what they needed. They didn't have it. We worked really hard to get it. And then in the effort of being present and showing that we care, those deliveries were made by hand as opposed to just having them show up in the mail.
Remarkable. Well, when you're working that way, you create an environment that we call a great place to work for all, which is really based on equity. And taking a look at your workforce and just doing a comparison, which is kind of the first demographic comparison we do, which is the work experience between men and women. Well, 95% of the women say that the Pulte Group is a great place to work, and 94% of men say the same. Number one, that's unusual, that the number is higher in terms of women compared to men. It comes as no surprise, as a result, that Pulte Group was on the Fortune Best Workplaces for Women's list. In your experience, what does it take to create an equitable experience for women in the workplace? I mean, as a result of the pandemic, over 2 million women were forced out of the workplace or left on their own volition, and many of them were women of color. At Pulte Group, however, your retention rate remains quite high, and women clearly feel, and stated in the survey, they feel they can learn, grow, and excel within your organization. What have you done to create such a positive experience for women, including marginalized women, in your workplace?
Well, Michael, the first thing is it goes back to that core belief of doing the right thing. And we absolutely treat everyone inside of this organization with the respect and the dignity that each of us deserve as human beings, regardless of gender, regardless of race. So that's a core tenet of who we are as an organization. And I certainly think that we've seen that pay dividends with the females that we have inside of our organization. Beyond that, Michael, I think we've recruited well. So as we've looked to go out and hire best-in-class talent, I think we've been really thoughtful about recruiting some of the best and brightest, talented women that are out there in the workplace that can make us better make our culture better, make our organization better. Some of the additional things that we've done inside our organization that I think have worked really well for us is we've highlighted the women that we have in leadership, and so we've told some of the personal stories about the great women that are inside of our company today. We've shared stories about their career paths. We've shared stories about the challenges that they've had, the successes they've had. And I think that's helped to kind of paint the picture and pave the way for others that are going to come behind them. Certainly, one of the other things that we continue to focus on is making sure that we're hiring women into all levels of the organization, from the top all the way down to, some of our entry level positions. And I think, that belief, that philosophy, that focus resonates with not only the women in our organization, but the men inside our organization as well, which creates that environment of fairness and equality. And that's what we really want.
So Ryan, thank you for that. And as you continue, in terms of the best talent, which is the whole point. But thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in 2022 and 2023, what are the kinds of things are on your mind that you're hoping for, to just empower and get more impact at the Pulte Group?
Michael, 2020 and specifically 2021, not only we had a lot to deal with as it relates to the pandemic, it's also been a clarion call for our country from a social equity standpoint and a racial equity standpoint. I think here at our company, we've done a lot of really great work in creating a great work environment, but we weren't perfect, and we're still not perfect for that matter. And so as we reflected on what we could do looking forward better, we did a couple things. We created our first ever diversity and inclusion board. That's a board that includes employees throughout all departments or representatives from all departments, all levels of the organization, and I chair that board. That board has led and continues to lead a lot of the great work that we've done inside of our organization as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've recently launched a Trailblazer series that's highlighted a number of unique stories from inside of our company around Black History Month, around Hispanic Heritage Month, around LGBTQ plus awareness. So some really unique, great things. This board's also led the creation of our business resource group. So, we look at it, Michael, and say that this is a journey. It needs to be a very long race. It's not going to be a sprint. We're not going to fix all of our challenges as a country. We're not going to fix all of our challenges as a company overnight. But we really feel that we've made this a collective team effort, and we've made this something that we all have responsibility and accountability for, which is probably one of the biggest changes that we made from how we historically did things inside of our organization. I won't go too far into the weeds, but historically we had hired a person or two, and we made diversity, equity, and inclusion their job. And I think they were doing really good work, but we didn't have the collective power of our organization harnessed. And I think, with some of the changes that we've made over the last 18 months, we're moving in a much different direction. And the thing that I really am proud of is that we're moving with intention and we're moving with urgency.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. And in terms of the future and the future of work, looking at the road ahead, um, and I know one leader to another, we often use the weekends to reflect and to think about what we can do with our leadership teams and with our people managers to get them to look forward and not look backwards. So, one of the things we're noticing with the companies we work with, some leaders are longing for 2018 and 2019. And yet many realize 2018 and 2019 weren't that great for everyone. So instead, how can we take this experience and go forward in a new way? What are some of the things you're thinking about? Some of the things you're hoping for? Some of the questions maybe in your mind as you're thinking about how to keep your team inspired and look forward towards a new day rather than longing for the past?
Michael, I've always lived, by the motto, never waste a good experience. And while the last 18 months, I think, have been incredibly hard for the world, for our country, for our company, there are so many experiences that I think will make us better people in the long run. We've learned a lot, we've evolved, we've innovated, and I think it would be a real shame to go backwards from where we're at today. We've changed the way we work, we've changed the way that we interact with each other, and I think there's actually a lot of benefit that has come out of it. And so my kind of hope as we move into 2022 is that we hang on to a lot of the great evolution that's taken place inside of corporate America. A couple of things that I'd probably highlight for you, we're really focused on what I'm referring to as a dynamic work schedule. And I know a lot of companies are calling it hybrid. I like the word dynamic better because I think it's got to morph and evolve based on what's happening in the individual lives of our employees and also what's happening inside of our business. So we've set a center-focused imperative for our organization that is embraced and endorsed the ability to come into the office when needed and also the ability to work from home when appropriate. And the reason that we've done that from the center, and it will be different for every job type and every employee group, but we've set a philosophy from the center because we want to make sure that there's equity. I think if we left it up to every individual people manager to make their own decision, inevitably you'd end up with some inequity from department to department. We certainly want to try and do our best to avoid that.
Very nice. And it's good. I mean, just your final point is the most important, to ensure that there's equity. And some people making the best decision on their own can create that situation where there's a lack of equity. So great catch there. Thank you, Ryan. And we're going to invite our friend Julian back in just to help us wrap things up. But before we do so, I'd just like you to talk about, you talked about your people the whole time here today. And over the weekend, when you think about your people, tell us about the feeling, the sense that how your people fuel you in your role as a leader at Pulte. Tell us something about the people at PulteGroup.
Well, Michael, we've always believed that we had amazing talent, amazing people here at the company. We always felt that our culture was strong, and it was put to the test over the last 18 months. And I'm happy to say I think we passed with flying colors. Our work's not done. We're continuing to do things each and every day with all of our people leaders and continuing to make sure that this is a great place to work. That's a job and work that in my view is never done. We've got an unbelievable business opportunity ahead of us as we move into 2022. There's never been a time, at least in the last 20 or so years, when the home has been so important in the lives of Americans. And the exciting thing is that our business. We talk about, we have the opportunity to build incredible places where people live their dreams. And we're in the business of building homes. And so not only do we have an amazing industry and an amazing business opportunity in front of us, we've got great colleagues and great workers that are part of our team that are helping to make that come to life.
Okay. Well, congratulations. You're really doing a really, really good job of it. And at the same time, as a humble leader, you say, we have a long way to go, which is true. You can also stop and say what the data says, which is you've come a long way. Julian, you can take us home.
Ryan, thank you for your candor today and the tremendous care that you and your leadership team provide for all of your people. This was a masterclass in for all leadership, and it starts with two-way communication, which is one of the most powerful tools in a leader's toolbox. To all of our listeners, I'm sure you learned something today. The recording will be available within an hour on our resources page under Better Together, so please share it out with your community. If you'd like to share your experience or you have additional questions, please send them to michael_bush@greatplacetowork.com. On behalf of Great Place to Work, thank you again for joining us, because we know and you know that we are better together. Take good care.